beefing up border security this Tuesday night.
This is an all-hands-on-deck plan.
The promise is made in the hopes of averting a tariff war, and what Canada's new fentanyl czar is supposed to do. Purchasing with pride and patriotism.
Immediately, we got a flood of those type of comments. We want to buy Canadian.
The rising momentum of the Buy Canadian movement. Fighting back what a Quebec union is planning as Amazon shuts down all of its warehouses in the province. And remembering the Aga Khan, the tributes pouring in for the spiritual leader of Ismaili Muslims.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Canada now has 30 days to figure out how to manage President Donald Trump's tariff threat. His last-minute decision not to put a sweeping 25% tax on goods from Canada and Mexico averts an immediate economic shock for both countries. But as with everything from this president, what comes next is impossible to predict. Canada, like Mexico, is promising 10,000 more people to patrol the border, trying to meet Trump's demand to stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. David Akin has our top story tonight.
Illicit drugs, controlled substances, and also explosives.
The day after the pause, a demonstration of Canada's border security officers at work.
The border is strong, but the investments we're making are making the border stronger.
The public safety minister visited a busy border crossing in Manitoba to send a message that Canada is taking its security commitments seriously.
Our objective today continues to be to prevent tariffs from being applied to both of our economies. And our objective tomorrow will be the same.
One of those commitments? The appointment of a fentanyl czar, an appointment that might come by the end of the week. And even though the U.S. says it intercepted less than 20 kilograms of fentanyl last year on the northern border, Canada's fentanyl czar will be given broad authority to coordinate anti-drug activities among Canada's diplomats, border officers, health officials, and security agents.
Fentanyl czar role will be involved in helping to pull all of this together so we can get over any hurdles and execute on a plan that involves minimizing, if not eliminating, fentanyl from Canadian soil.
Canada also promised to assign 10,000 people to patrol the border. Those people will come from the RCMP, the Canada Border Services Agency, as well as from provincial and municipal police agencies.
This is an all-hands-on-deck plan that we're executing together because it's just simply too much at stake not to get this right.
Campaigning to be re-elected as Ontario Premier, Doug Ford said boosting border security will also prevent illegal northward flows of drugs and guns coming into Canada.
We met with our OPP and RCMP and everyone's pitching in. That's the way it should work. It's not one-sided here.
Alberta's Premier agreed.
I'm glad to see that we put together a robust package that seems to have satisfied the American concerns for now.
For now. And that was also the message from Smith, Ford, and others the day after the tariff pause. Canada is still staring down the barrel of a tariff war that could ignite in a month, and all levels of government should continue to prepare for that worst-case scenario. Donna.
David, how much of the promise to beef up border security is optics, trying to show the president we're serious, but maybe not making a meaningful difference? What are ministers and the premier saying about that?
The government's line, Donna, on that question is this. These improvements are being made for Canadians and not just for the current occupant of the White House. And in fact, multiple premiers and opposition leader Pierre Poilievre have said we should be taking these measures even if there was no Donald Trump. Still, the government has yet to provide key details about this new border security plan, and until it does, it will be difficult for Canadians to assess whether this is just optics or a new border reality.
Okay, David Akin in Ottawa, thank you. The Canadian dollar, which had sunk to a 22-year low against the U.S. dollar, rebounded today after that 30-day pause on tariffs. It closed at almost 70 cents U.S. The TSX, S&P, and NASDAQ were all up slightly. Investors hoping the tariffs are just a negotiating tactic by President Trump. Those who live within a short drive of Canada's border with the U.S. are not only our closest neighbors, they rely on us for all sorts of things. And they are in turmoil, too. As Sean O'Shea reports from Buffalo, New York, consumers, businesses, and tourism are all bracing for a hit.
Two countries on either sides of the Peace Bridge between Fort Erie, Ontario, and Buffalo, New York. An American city well aware of the possibilities of costly tariffs and Canada's pledge to respond in kind.
I think tariffs with our friends, our neighbors, is a terrible idea.
Rick Smith runs a third-generation family business that makes all kinds of metal panels used in truck bodies, airports, and elevators. His company gets at least 25% of its metal from Canada and has customers on the other side of the border, too.
And when we're shipping to our Canadian customers, we're going to have to, again, hope that they take this huge price increase, which they may not. What are we going to do? Is there layoffs maybe? Is there this? You can't absorb all those extra costs.
Donald Trump's threat to place tariffs on Canadian imports is bad news for the tourism industry in the Buffalo region. 40% of visitors here are Canadian, and a growing number are vocal about staying away from the United States. The region's travel promotion body just had to scrap an online ad campaign.
And we had to pull it. The comments were very negative in relation to the tariffs.
And the top elected executive here says tariffs are bad news all around.
Would be very bad for both countries, but specifically for this region because we are so dependent on cross-border economic traffic.
For these Canadian students in a pharmacy program in Buffalo, there's hope the dispute gets settled.
I feel like we're really good partners, so I feel like we should try finding a resolution between us two.
We don't know what's next, so we don't know what to expect.
And while the Trump tariff proposal is unpopular, some politicians are trying to distance themselves as much as possible.
And we want to reassure you that we are still your friends, we are your allies, regardless of what the president might be saying.
So on both sides of the border, Canadians and Americans must wait on hold until next month to see whether Donald Trump will back down from his original promise or go ahead with tariffs anyway, something that would trigger a tariff war. Donna.
Sean O'Shea in Buffalo, New York tonight. Thanks. President Trump's demands of his closest neighbors are hard to pin down. He claims Canada has been very unfair for years. He's unhappy about what he claims is a big trade deficit with Canada, and he'd like Canada to become the 51st state. And then there are those claims about fentanyl flowing from Canada to the U.S. In Washington today, there was a Senate hearing about fentanyl, which is killing thousands of Americans. Jackson Prosco went to find out whether Canada was in the crosshairs.
We later learned that Devin was poisoned by fentanyl.
At a hearing called The Poisoning of America, senators heard about the devastating impacts of fentanyl.
I walked into my son's room and found him practically lifeless.
They heard from expert witnesses about drug cartels and open borders.
We want it to stop. We want to stop it in China. We want to stop it in Mexico. We want to stop it in our backyards.
Yet there was almost no mention of fentanyl coming from Canada, despite the explosive claims made by President Donald Trump, used to justify his tariff threats.
Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
U.S. government statistics show 43 pounds or 19.5 kilograms of fentanyl were seized at the Canadian border in 2024, compared to more than 21,000 pounds, more than 9,000 kilograms from Mexico.
What the president was demanding is cooperation from Canada.
Facts in hand, we asked Republicans if the president is treating America's closest ally fairly.
There were only 43 pounds of fentanyl recovered at the Canadian border last year, 21,000 pounds from Mexico.
Northern crossings have skyrocketed over the last 4 years. And if there was one issue that was the overwhelming mandate from this last election, it was a mandate from the voters to secure the border.
Was it fair the way the president treated his closest trading partners?
Oh, yeah, it was great. Look at what he got out of it in relatively short order, too. So I look forward to what's next.
What's next could be new demands from Trump. We found senators quick to find other grievances with Canada, just as the president has done in recent days.
On fentanyl, was it appropriate to treat Canada and Mexico equally on that file?
Sure.
There were only 43 pounds of fentanyl seized at the Canadian border, 21,000 pounds from Mexico.
We've got other issues with Canada, though, in terms of how they're treating us. Just ask our dairy farmers.
It all suggests Canadian officials should prepare for the possibility of surprises during the next month of tariff negotiations.
And it's the blunt force approach that Trump takes to anything.
Canada may not have picked this fight, but now faces the prospect of a trade war with no clear justification. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
According to the White House, the first U.S. military flight to deport migrants from the U.S. to Guantanamo Bay has taken off and is expected to land this evening. It is the first step in an expected surge in the number of migrants sent to the Navy base in Cuba, which for decades was primarily used to detain foreigners associated with the September 11th terrorist attacks.
There's not a lot left to strike. It's a demolition site. The whole place is demolished. It's unsafe. It's unsanitary. It's not a place where people want to live.
He's talking about Gaza. President Trump floating the idea again that Palestinians should be forced to leave Gaza. And after meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump said the U.S. will take over Gaza and develop it, creating thousands of jobs.
We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute, I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad, this could be so magnificent.
Trump claims everyone he's spoken to loves the idea of the U.S. owning Gaza. It's not clear who he has spoken to, and he has never been to Gaza. As with his idea that Canada should become the 51st U.S. state, just because Trump says the U.S. will take charge and permanently displace Palestinians does not mean it will happen. Trump's second term has put a lot of countries off balance and made many Canadians angry. The idea that the leader of our closest neighbor would say America doesn't need anything from us has sparked a wave of patriotism. Shallima Maharaj reports.
Buy local is a concept Vince's Market has been embracing for decades. The independent grocer is putting its patriotism where its product is.
It started from our customers at least a week ago or a week before the tariffs were really on the brink. They started emailing in or on our Facebook page asking questions saying we want to buy more Canadian.
Giancarlo Tremarchi and his team came up with these stickers.
What percentage would you say of what you've got on the shelves is actually American?
It's not as much as I thought. We're probably only around 15 to 20% of American. And a lot of that right now is in produce, only because of the time of year.
It is hard to find Canadian products, so knowing that that's on the shelf and that I'm buying Canadian, even if it was a couple, like say 50 cents more, I probably would purchase it to support Canada, yes.
If it's in bold, it's very nice because now you know that it's coming from your own country. So I think it's a great thing they're doing that.
Matt Poirier of the Retail Council of Canada says while strengthening the domestic economy is important,
it's way more important to maintain that access and to maintain those trade relationships that have benefited both sides so well over all these years.
Flourish Pancakes prides itself on being a protein powerhouse, and it's Canadian, with sales recently expanding into the U.S.
We prepared as if they were getting put in place. And what we did is we created more product from our Canadian manufacturing facility and shipped that south of the border to service our American customers so that we weren't having to ship during these next few months.
And while the 30-day pause is a welcome reprieve, Canadian businesses hope consumers will keep them top of mind.
The more we can support these up-and-coming Canadian brands, the better chance we have of them growing into big brands. And hopefully with that support, they'll stay manufacturing in Canada for the long term, and that will help grow our food agriculture business in Canada.
Shallima Maharaj, Global News, Toronto.
RCMP in Saskatchewan are investigating the suspicious deaths of 4 people on Carry the Kettle, Nakota Nation. It's about 85 kilometers east of Regina. RCMP say they responded to a report of sudden deaths in the community this morning and found 4 bodies inside a home. What a Quebec union is planning to deliver to Amazon as the company closes warehouses. A Quebec union is calling for a boycott of Amazon and launching a lawsuit. The e-commerce giant closed all its Quebec warehouses last month and is laying off about 2,000 workers. Amazon claims it's shifting to a different business model in Quebec, but it means the first Amazon facility in Canada to unionize is now also shut down. And as Mike Armstrong reports, that could spell trouble for others trying to unionize.
Donc, les mises à pied sont réelles.
The call for an Amazon boycott comes with a biblical message. The signs held by laid-off unionized workers read in French, "Deliver us from Amazon."
This is not the way we do business in Quebec. This is not the way we do business in Canada.
The CSN represents about 1,600 unions across the province, including the workers that lost their jobs at Amazon. The company says it's replacing its staff with subcontractors The CSN says it's simple union busting.
No, they're not fooling anyone. The only reason Amazon has a different business model just for Quebec is to avoid a union from forming.
Last May, about 230 employees at this facility north of Montreal became the first unionized Amazon workers in Canada, while Amazon is closing it and 6 others. The union is now calling on all levels of government and the public to boycott the company. It's also going to court to try to have the workers reinstated.
Closing stores for the purpose of avoiding collective bargaining is a violation of the Quebec Labor Code.
Now, there is a strong legal precedent in the case. In 2004, a Walmart in the Saguenay region voted to unionize. That store was then deemed, according to the company, unprofitable and shut down. The union fought all the way to the Supreme Court, eventually winning. Walmart paid damages with interest, but it effectively killed the union and union drives at Walmarts in 4 provinces. 20 years later, none are unionized in Canada today.
Well, that's the problem, is that the likely outcome is not going to be very helpful.
Even with the strong precedent, if Amazon workers win, getting their jobs back is the longest of long shots, and a fine for Amazon is something it's barely going to feel. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Fleeing paradise ahead, why thousands are leaving this popular Greek island. Thousands of residents and seasonal workers are leaving the Greek island of Santorini. Hundreds of small earthquakes have been recorded there since Saturday near the popular tourist destination. No major damage has been reported. The evacuations are a precaution. Santorini is on what's known as the Hellenic Volcanic Arc, a chain of islands created by volcanoes. The last major eruption there was in the 1950s. Well, despite giving Mexico and Canada a month's breathing room, President Trump's 10% tariffs on China have taken effect. Trump plans to speak with China's president in the days ahead, but Beijing has wasted no time hitting back with its own retaliatory tariffs, which, as Redmond Shannon reports, are only ratcheting up the economic war.
The world's 2 largest economies are both competitors and codependents. There was no way China would let Donald Trump's 10% tariff on all Chinese goods slide. Beijing now set to impose targeted tariffs and measures next Monday. They include 15% tariffs on oil, coal and natural gas from the US, 10% on goods like farm machinery and pickup trucks, and Chinese export controls on some metals. China said it will also investigate Google for monopoly practices, even though the tech giant doesn't operate in China.
I would say not as harmful as it could have been, number one. Google is another example. Why not Apple?
This Hong Kong-based economist says the delay in China's response until Monday is telling.
It looks like China is screaming for a deal.
That's fine. It's fine. We're going to do very well against China and against everybody else.
Trump's tariffs affect everything China sells to the US, the biggest sectors being electronics, machinery, and kids' toys and games.
The ultimate goal of Mr. Trump might be really to reestablish the leadership of the U.S. economy at the expense of everybody else.
There is no word on whether Trump will speak with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. Meanwhile, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the EU will protect its own interests as Trump threatens that the European bloc will be taxed next. Donna?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thanks, Redmond. Remembering the Aga Khan next, tributes to the spiritual leader of Ismaili Muslims. The spiritual leader of the world's Ismaili Muslims has died. The Aga Khan, considered by his followers to be a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, was a wealthy religious leader and socialite who expanded his wealth through racehorse breeding and luxury hotels. He was known, too, for his philanthropic work. And as Eric Sorensen reports, he had close links to Canada.
He was spiritual leader of the world's Ismaili Muslims for almost 70 years and a billionaire philanthropist. He inherited the title Aga Khan as a 20-year-old, then spent much of his life as an entrepreneur, building wealth and contributing to society with his charitable work. In this country, the Aga Khan will always be associated with the name Trudeau. He was friends with Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau and came to know his young son, Justin.
His Highness the Aga Khan was an extraordinarily compassionate global leader, a man of vision, of faith, and of incredible generosity. He was passionate about Canada and what we've been able to create here in this country. Hello, God.
He served as United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. In 1971, with the Aga Khan's involvement, Pierre Trudeau, as Prime Minister, accepted thousands of refugees who were expelled from Uganda. Because of his connection with the elder Trudeau, he focused much of his charitable work in Canada.
He is truly a beacon of humanitarianism, of pluralism, and of tolerance throughout the entire world. Mr. Speaker, I've informed the Aga Khan that our government will be seeking the consent of the House to extend honorary citizenship to His Highness.
It was years later, in 2016, that he extended an invitation to Justin Trudeau to vacation on the Aga Khan's private island in the Caribbean. Accepting that gift sparked a conflict of interest investigation. A year later, the Ethics Commissioner, Mary Dawson, found that Trudeau was not a close personal friend and should not have accepted the holiday. The Prime Minister said he accepted the findings.
I took responsibility. I accepted the full recommendations of the Commissioner.
The Aga Khan lived much of his life in France, was a jet setter who loved horses and horse racing. He was friends with Queen Elizabeth. At Pierre Trudeau's funeral, he was seated prominently with former U.S. President Jimmy Carter and former Governor-General Romeo Leblanc. Another Governor-General, Adrienne Clarkson, called him a visionary. His wealth and influence afforded him the opportunity to make his great contribution to charity, helping communities around the world, including construction of the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto and the Global Centre for Pluralism in Ottawa, in partnership with the federal government. The Aga Khan was 88.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is this frozen waterfall near Cranbrook, BC. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.